This really happened to me, and I'm telling it with the names I lived through. I'm a 61-year-old woman from Seattle, and I have the emails, the court docket, and the scars to prove it. The subject line on my phone, sitting face up on the marble bar at the Hotel Sorrento's fireside room, said, "Your beneficiary has changed." It arrived in the middle of my own birthday party. The jazz trio softened to a whisper, champagne flutes chimed, and as Derek leaned in to kiss my cheek, his lawyer, standing across the room in a bone-gray suit, tapped a message and hit "Reply all" to the party chain, bragging that the switch on my retirement account had gone through. He didn't notice his mistake until the room went silent and 100 pockets lit up with the same notification, a neon confession bouncing from Queen Anne to Capitol Hill in under a second. If you genuinely enjoy our stories, please subscribe to the channel, tell us where you're from, and what time it is right now. It's always fascinating to know how far our story flows. I had chosen the Sorrento because I like old rooms that remember things. The fireside room remembers secrets. Red velvet chairs, a fireplace flickering under a brass hood, a ceiling coffered like an old ship. I used to come there in the early 1990s after long tech rehearsals, back when I was a lighting designer for regional theaters, long before I traded black jeans and gaffer's tape for a more sedate life-teaching arts administration at Seattle Central College. I came to the Sorrento on rainy nights to warm my feet and write in a leather-bound notebook. When I turned 61, my friend Nora insisted on the Sorrento because it felt elegant and because it made me happy. She was right, until she wasn't. I met Derek at Cary Park on Queen Anne the autumn before, just after sunset, when the Space Needle came on like a star and the ferries floated their strings of light across Elliott Bay. He was 10 years younger, all easy grin and confidence. A real estate agent and advisor, he said, who specialized in untying knots for high net worth clients. I had never thought of myself as high net worth. I had a paid-off condo on Capitol Hill I bought in 2002, back when a public school teacher's salary could still flirt with a mortgage, and I had a retirement account from my years at ACT Theater, growth funds rolling on autopilot. I had no children. My niece, Mira, was my chosen heir. I was lonely, which is more dangerous than any loaded gun, and I was flattered. Derek liked old Seattle places, or at least he learned to like them for me. The roast chicken at Le Pichet, the bread and handmade pasta at Spinace, martinis at Vito's where the booths swallow secrets whole. He listened to my stories about cranky directors and midnight focus calls. He looked at me the way men stop looking at women after we cross 50, as if my face were a door they wanted to walk through. He didn't mind that I wear orthotics. He didn't mind my stiff shoulder or the creak in my left knee from years on ladders. He said my hair, silver, not gray, made me look like I'd swallowed moonlight. He brought me coffee from Victrola. He fixed my jammed windows. He explained the tax advantages of this and that until my eyes glazed over. He told me I'd earned the right to simplify, to let him help. And he introduced me to his friend Connor, a lawyer from a boutique firm downtown, the sort of man who looks like he's dressed for a magazine shoot even when he's just running to Bartell's for aspirin. Connor said he did asset protection, standard estate tune-ups, no big deal. "We can just look," he said. "If anything needs updating, we'll update it." It started small. Did I have my beneficiaries up to date on my Vanguard and Prudential accounts? Did I still want to leave a portion to the Seattle Repertory Theater, like I joked about in my 40s? We sat in my kitchen with its clean Caesar stone counter and views of a slate sky over the cathedral, and he slid a printed checklist across the island. No pressure. Just sign where you want to keep things as they are. Sign where you want to change. We'll notarize at the office. "We'll do it all proper," he said, and smiled with his sharp white teeth. I should have known. But people who preface things with no pressure are always pressing. People who specialize in untying knots, like knots that make them necessary. And I, after a life spent lighting other people's shows, wanted against common sense and the better angels of my friends to be somebody's. So, in the fireside room, music soft, my name spelled in chocolate on my dessert plate, my phone buzzing like a trapped wasp, I saw the subject line and read it twice. Your beneficiary has changed. Then I read the preview text. Your recent request has been processed. And the room went odd and shallow around me, like I'd stepped onto a stage and the house fell away, leaving only the locked circle of light. When I looked up, I saw Connor angle his phone and smirk. He thought he'd sent his little victory note to Derek alone, but he'd hit reply all on the Evite thread, and the first line of his message was already peeking on screens like a flasher's coat. We're golden. Hers to you, then mine to the trust, by Monday. Every head bent down. Every whisper went sideways. And Derek, dear Derek with his warm hands and his practiced eyes, did what cornered men do. He laughed too loudly and raised his glass and leaned closer to say, "Baby, this must be a glitch from that thing you signed." I turned the phone face down, and the Sorrento, with its memory of secrets, held its breath with me as I decided whether to stand up and torch the room or to let the match burn a moment longer, because a bright flame draws more witnesses. The next morning I walked to Café Ladro on 15th Avenue, the one near the light rail construction, because I like watching things get made. The rain lifted enough to leave the sidewalk shining. I am old enough to know that an emergency does not excuse bad coffee. I ordered an Americano and a croissant and pulled the email back up. Vanguard. The message wasn't vague. It listed the account, the date stamp, the confirmation number. It said the change had been made online via secure profile. It said if I didn't authorize the change to call immediately. I called. On the line, a woman named Erica was calm and good at her job. She asked for the confirmation code, then asked me to verify my last login. I said I hadn't logged in for weeks. She read me the IP address. She read me the device type, MacBook Pro on Chrome. She read me the timestamp, 5:12 p.m., the day before my party. "Does that sound like you?" she asked carefully, ready for the answer to be no. "Ma'am, do you have anyone else with access to your computer?" "I'm a widow," I said, without thinking, though I've never been married. I'm a widow to an idea. I'm a widow to trust. Erica told me how to freeze the account and initiate a fraud review. She said it would put a hold on all beneficiary changes while their team investigated. I asked what name the beneficiary had been changed to. There was a pause, tapping on a keyboard, a low whistle like a woman looking over a steep ledge. "It looks like the primary beneficiary was updated to Derek Irons," she said, then added, "and contingent to the Connor Avery Revocable Trust." She did not ask if those names meant anything to me. She didn't need to. "Ma'am, I'd like to recommend you also call the Washington State Office of the Insurance Commissioner if you have any life policies, and consider filing a police report for identity theft. We'll send you an affidavit." I walked home with my cup pinched so tight it crinkled. Derek had a key to my place, because of course he did. He'd use that key to bring me lilies, to stock my fridge with grapefruit and yogurt, to fix the window that stuck on cold mornings. I changed the locks, and because I am an older woman who has spent enough nights in backstage shadows to know how people enter and exit, I also put a piece of blue painter's tape on the inside of my door, bridging from the jamb to the door like a hinge of paper. If the door opened while I was out, the tape would rip. I called Nora. She is my truest friend, a trial nurse who has stood in more courtrooms than most attorneys. She came over with her bulldog Franklin, whose jowls at rest looked skeptical. She made me tea and made me promise not to delete a single thing. She asked for my laptop, took a photo of its serial number, and said, "We're taking this to Ahmed." Ahmed is an IT manager in the UW Computer Science Department and the closest thing I have to a magician. He does not believe in magic. He believes in logs. He believes that the truth, bored with our drama, leaves fingerprints because it wants to be found. In a little lab off Stevens Way, with undergrads clacking by in wet sneakers, Ahmed imaged my laptop hard drive to preserve it, then installed a clean OS build. He told me to change my passwords using a machine Derek couldn't touch, and to enroll in extra verification on every account I owned. When I told him about the Sorrento email, I watched anger, clean, clinical, move like weather behind his eyes. People don't become criminals overnight, Ahmed said. They become criminals by managing their appetites. That email isn't an accident. It's an appetite finally careless. I'll bet you a stack of receipts he's been probing your accounts for weeks, maybe months. We'll know. Back at my condo, the blue tape was still unbroken. I made a list on a yellow legal pad because I am a woman who likes to write things down. I listed accounts, dates, the names of every person I'd told about Derek, even the bartender at Vito's who always remembered his rye neat. I wrote notary and underlined it twice because Connor had mentioned notarizing at the office. Whose office? What office? Where was that bright seal of legitimacy going to be stamped on my life? I had just poured myself more tea when a text burst onto my new phone, Ahmed's insistence. You overreacted. Derek. He followed it with a screenshot of a "we need to talk" message he'd sent to the Evite list. He said I embarrassed him. He said he'd been planning an engagement ring. He said he'd simplified my paperwork because I'd asked him to. He said Connor was only trying to help. I told him not to come over. Then I called my niece, Mira, who is 27 and a software engineer in South Lake Union. She has a sarcastic mouth and the good manners to apologize afterward. She said, "Aunt Lynn, I will burn them down," and I loved her for wanting to. But I told her we would not light anything we could not put out. We would proceed like women who'd learned from a lifetime of being told we overreact. On Monday, I reported to the Washington State Office of the Insurance Commissioner in the Seattle Police Department's fraud unit. I spent 2 hours at the King County Courthouse on 3rd Avenue, navigating a fluorescent labyrinth and a vending machine that refused my dollar, to file a motion for a temporary restraining order to keep any beneficiary changes from being enforced while the investigation proceeded. The clerk at room E609 stamped the papers with a thud that felt like a gavel in miniature. I called Vanguard and Prudential to tell them court papers were coming, and then I called Connor. He didn't pick up. Of course he didn't. He sent a letter instead, on cream paper with a watermark, delivered by a courier whose eyes wouldn't meet mine. The letter was pure, studied civility, the kind that sounds polite while bearing teeth. It said what a shame that I had misapprehended my own signatures, how they had assisted in good faith to streamline my affairs, how any allegation of fraud was defamatory per se and would be pursued vigorously. I held the page and watched the words dissolve like ink in rain. Nora laughed, a short, ungentle sound. If the truth were a nail, that letter would be butter, she said. But we need the hammer. The hammer, she explained, was evidence, which is how I found myself 3 days later in the lobby of a nondescript building on 3rd Avenue, asking the desk guard for the notary public who served Connor's firm. The notary's name was Pam. She had a kind mouth and tired eyes. The office smelled like toner and old paper. I asked to see her notary journal, and she politely told me no. I showed her a copy of the court's TRO and the part that authorized discovery preservation for any documents that touched my name. Her supervisor came out in a too-tight tie and told me to send a formal subpoena. I did, the same day, with Nora's help. A week later, I had copies of Pam's entries. My signature appeared on a line dated 2 weeks before my birthday. The entry said I had signed in person, that she had checked my Washington driver's license. The signature was mine, mostly. The L in Lynn was too low. The N leaned right like a drunk. And under a magnifier, Ahmed's treat, you could see faint graphite under the ink line, as if someone had left themselves a ghost to trace. The ghost, it turned out, had a body. Ahmed pulled credential logs from my old laptop's Google account. He found that a new Chrome profile called Guest had been used, then deleted. He found autofill entries for an address on Western Avenue that I knew to be Connor's firm. He found a docked iPhone detected on my Bluetooth list, not my phone, not Mira's either, with the label Derek iPhone. He found a webcam access permission granted on a Tuesday when I was with Mira at the Volunteer Park Conservatory. He found enough to make me feel sick. I did what women do when we are cornered and too old to be charming. I made a plan. I would not scream. I would not wheedle. I would pull the thread until the sweater came off in public, and then I would fold the sweater carefully and hand it to the judge, which is how I came to host a second party. I told everyone the Sorrento affair had shaken me up and that I wanted to turn the page with a fundraiser for the ACT Theater's education program in the Hotel Sorrento same room, because sometimes you have to exorcise a ghost by inviting it back to tell you its name. I invited Derek and Connor, too. I told them if they wanted to make things right, they could donate to a cause I loved. Connor replied, all charm, that of course they'd be there. I bought a second party dress, navy silk, sleeves to the elbow, a neckline that said, I respect myself, and you will too. I wore my mother's pearls, the ones she bought at Nordstrom in 1966 on a layaway plan, 1 week at a time. I asked Ahmed to set up a special guest Wi-Fi network in the fireside room with logging, and to bring a small device he called a pineapple that would watch the traffic chatter like a gossip on a stoop. I asked Nora to stand near the bar and Mira to linger by the fireplace. I did not tell them everything. I did not tell anyone everything. I know the nature of a trap. You leave it empty and let hunger do the work. At 6:58 p.m., the Sorrento's lamps glowed honey against rain streaks, and the pianist coaxed Misty into the carpet. Guests drifted in with umbrellas like black flowers. Derek arrived in a navy suit that made him look like an apology. Connor arrived in a check jacket that made him look like money explaining itself. They air-kissed me. My skin crawled and then went very still. At 7:12 p.m., I sent an email to the same Evite list. The subject line was nothing special. Quick logistics before the toast, PLS read. The body was short. If you agreed to sign tonight's pledge card in advance, thank you. The form is attached for your convenience. No rush. If you'd prefer a paper card, we have plenty. I attached a blank pledge card PDF. I sent another email, just to Derek, a minute later. Let's try to put this behind us. The best thing you can do tonight is follow Connor's advice and keep it simple. Ahmed, across the room with the ginger ale, watched the pineapple dance. He didn't need to change anything. He didn't need to hack a thing. He only needed to see what hungry men would do when they thought dinner was being served again. And Connor, hungry, did not disappoint. He replied to my email. Or rather, he replied to Derek about my email without noticing his thumb had tapped Reply All on the thread that still included the pianist, the bartender, my friend Nora, my niece, the Sorrento events manager, half of the theater department at Seattle U, Ahmed, and a half-dozen couples Derek was courting for business. Just get her to sign the card, Connor wrote. Snap a pic of it in her hand, keep her fingers covering any unhelpful language, and we'll upload to Vanguard with the DocuSign we built last week. Her login still works. I've got the cookie. Beneficiary stays Irons Trust until the TRO expires. By then, assets can be rehomed. The room went quiet the way an ocean goes quiet when it realizes it is being watched. Heads bent. Gasps died small deaths behind fingers. The bartender, without missing a beat, poured water into a glass and set it in front of me like I might need it. Derek saw it all too late, the way a man sees the curb right before his ankle turns. He grabbed his phone as if the pixels could unspill themselves back into their bottles. Connor went pale, then red, then streetlight yellow. The pianist, oblivious to the legal weather, played the bridge of Misty and looked up at us through his bangs as if waiting for the cue to stop. I let the silence sit. Then I lifted my glass, not a toast, not yet, and said, Connor, I'll need you to repeat those last 3 sentences aloud. He shook his head in tiny jerks. His mouth opened and closed like a fish. Fine, I said, and nodded to Nora, who had already taken screenshots. Mira, dear, efficient Mira, had already forwarded the reply all to her personal account, to mine, to my lawyers, and, God bless her spite, to a reporter at the Seattle Times who had once interviewed me about the effect of budget cuts on community arts. Ahmed, not smiling, quietly airdropped me a log excerpt tying Connor's phone to the reply and the reply to the Sorrento network. It was a beautiful braid. Derek touched my elbow, the way men touch women to reclaim authority. I moved my arm like an officer stepping out of a hold. "Don't," I said, and my voice carried. "Don't touch me. Don't talk to me. Don't explain. Save it for your deposition." That night, I slept for 4 hours with the kind of sleep that comes after a storm when you can hear the gutters working. In the morning, I called the Washington State Bar Association and filed a grievance, attaching the reply all, the notary journal entries, and Ahmed's affidavits. I called the Seattle Police Department's detective on duty and added the new evidence to my report. I called Vanguard and Prudential and sent them everything. Their fraud teams, like white blood cells, moved in. I emailed the Office of the Insurance Commissioner again. I drove to the King County Courthouse and filed a motion to extend and expand the TRO and a civil complaint for fraud, conversion, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Connor's firm responded with a precision only fear can buy. They filed a motion to quash, a motion to strike, a motion to call my actions vindictive and histrionic. They sent a private investigator to ask my neighbors whether I took my trash out at odd hours, as if peculiar recycling habits could erase a reply. All heard round the room. They threatened to file an anti-slap motion, which would have been adorable if it weren't so tired. Derek sent flowers to my office at the college, which I handed to the security guard without taking the card. The guard, kind and tired, said, "Good," and tossed them into the staff lounge vase, where unclaimed apologies go to wilt. Evidence doesn't care how loudly someone says, histrionic. The court cares about evidence. In discovery, with Ahmed's help, and a lawyer named JC who had spent a decade prosecuting white-collar cases before opening her own shop, we pulled DocuSign metadata that showed an envelope created from Connor's IP at 12:03 a.m. on a Thursday night, pre-filled with my name, then accessed from an IP 2 blocks from my condo the next morning. We pulled a cookie value that matched the one Connor referenced in his careless email. We pulled Wi-Fi association logs from the Sorrento, stamped and notarized by the hotel's IT contractor, tying his device label and MAC address to the reply all at the exact minute the pianist played Misty. We pulled bank statements showing transfers from Derek to a new account in the name of a Shell LLC registered in Delaware 3 days after my Sorrento birthday party. The notary, Pam, when deposed, cried. She said she'd notarized what her boss told her to notarize. She handed over her journal and said she wanted out. I watched Derek on the other side of the conference table during deposition. His hands shook when he signed in. He had grown smaller, as if the suit were wearing him rather than the other way around. He tried to smile at me. I watched his lawyer squeeze his knee under the table, a little mercy men afford each other in rooms where women have finally brought the lights up. JC asked him about the beneficiary rehoming language. He said he didn't know what Connor meant. JC asked him about the cookie. He said he thought cookies were for saving passwords. JC asked him whether he'd ever used my laptop. He said maybe once to look up a recipe. "For what?" JC asked. He couldn't remember. "You can't remember the recipe you looked up on the laptop of the woman you said you loved?" JC asked, her voice in a register I recognized from 1,000 crossfades, warm, then brighter, then a little brighter still. He said he was nervous. "Good," JC said. "That's the beginning of honesty." Connor's deposition was a hinge. He tried wit first. It failed. He tried charm. It failed less, but still failed. Then he sat in silence and asked for a break. When he came back, JC showed him the email, enlarged on a screen. The words looked worse at scale. "We're golden. Hers to you, then mine to the trust, by Monday." She asked him to read it. He did, like a man rinsing his mouth with poison. "Did you send this?" "It appears I did." "To whom did you intend to send it?" "To my client." "To whom did you actually send it?" He swallowed. To the Evite list. The court reporter coughed into a sleeve to hide a laugh and failed. And when you wrote Beneficiary stays Irons Trust until the TRO expires, what did you mean? That we would preserve the status quo, he said, trying a lawyer's trick, the bland euphemism in a house fire. JC let the silence sit, loud as a siren. Mr. Avery, what did you mean? He stared at the wall. I meant we would keep Ms. Hanlon's accounts controlled by Mr. Irons and the trust I manage until we could solve around the court's order. The room exhaled. Somewhere the gods of reply all lifted their shot glasses. The hearing in King County Superior Court was on a Wednesday in May. Traffic on 3rd Avenue paused around buses and cranes. Seattle smelled like wet wool and coffee. We were in Department 12, a wood-paneled box with flags at the front, and a judge with an expression like clear glass. The court clerk called the case. My knees knocked. Nora squeezed my hand until my knuckles felt like they'd break. Mira sat behind me with a notebook and a pen and the eyes of a hawk. Derek sat 2 rows back, alone. Connor sat at counsel table with his partner, and a brow so tight it looked stapled. JC built our case like a scaffolding, each piece locking into the next. The beneficiary change confirmation, Exhibit 1, the IP logs from Vanguard, Exhibit 2, the notary journal with my skewed signature, Exhibit 3, the DocuSign meta, Exhibit 4, the Wi-Fi logs, Exhibit 5, the reply all email, Exhibit 6, the bank transfers to the shell company, Exhibit 7, the deposition transcripts, Exhibit 8, the OIC caseworker's affidavit, Exhibit 9. Each exhibit was nothing alone. Together they made a room. Connor's counsel argued hard that we were overreaching and misinterpreting private communications. The judge asked him whether we're golden, hers to you, then mine to the trust, by Monday, was a misinterpretation of we're golden. He said context mattered. The judge said words mattered more. The judge extended the TRO and froze any beneficiary changes across all my accounts pending trial. He ordered that any access to my accounts by anyone but me be terminated and verified in writing by the custodians. He sanctioned Connor's firm for discovery abuses and set a hearing for possible referral to the bar for further investigation. He granted our motion to add a claim for civil conspiracy. He looked at me as he said it, not at JC, not at Nora, not at Mira, but at me, and nodded once as if to say, "You kept your receipts." Seattle is a small town that pretends it is a city. The Seattle Times ran a story 2 weeks later. Reply all exposes alleged fraud in beneficiary switch. It was unkind but fair, and my face was not in it. Another article in Crosscut followed about elder financial abuse in a tech city that talks progressive and sometimes acts like a shark. My students brought me cookies and stories about their grandmothers. My neighbor left a post-it on my door that said simply, "We see you." Connor's firm began to bleed. Clients asked questions. One of the partners took medical leave. The notary, Pam, quit and took a job at a veterinary office in Ballard. She sent me a note that said she was sorry. I believed her. People can be trapped inside machines they didn't build. Derek's phone went dark to me. When I saw him in the grocery store on 15th, he ducked into the frozen food aisle and hid behind bags of peas. I stood with my basket and waited until he walked out, because I wanted the shape of his awkwardness to etch in his memory. He said, "Lynn, I didn't mean..." And I said, "Derek, mean and do are different verbs. Judges speak both." He started to cry, real tears, not the kind that comes when someone needs a prop. I thought about the first night he kissed me on my porch, the way he'd grabbed my hands like I was a rung on a ladder out of a dark pit. In that brief aisle, I grieved not just him, but the American plague of men who mistake women for exits to rooms they built themselves. Trial dates have a way of moving like mirages. Ours slid from August to October to January. Meanwhile, the Bar Association moved in a separate orbit with a gravity all its own. They opened their own investigation, called their own witnesses, and set a disciplinary hearing for Connor. I didn't have to attend, but I did. The hearing room on the second floor felt like a church where the hymns are complaints. A panel of lawyers listened to Connor explain context and misunderstanding and technical misadventure, while JC, not a party but present, sat with a face that could have been carved from a gavel handle. When they asked him why he wrote, "We'll keep her accounts controlled until the TRO expires," he said he was exploring options. They suspended him, not disbarred, not yet, but suspended pending the outcome of our case and whatever the OIC decided on the insurance side. The difference between suspended and disbarred is a thin line, but it's a line that turns men who rely on momentum into men who must sit still. You learn about people at speed. You learn more when you watch them stop. On a Sunday, alone, I took the Bainbridge Island ferry and stood on the bow as the wind tried to convince me to lean. The Olympics wore their white crowns, and I counted container ships like sheep. I thought about my mother in 1966 wearing her first pearls to a diner on First Avenue and sitting up straighter because she felt she'd bought a piece of the world that could not be talked away. I thought about the girls in my theater classes, pink hair, Doc Martens, the room-filling courage of 19, who ask why older women in plays always get the roles of witches or widows, and I told them it's because we learn to cook our own potions. At trial, Connor settled. On the second day of testimony, after the notary and the Sorrento IT contractor and the Vanguard investigator and Ahmed explained cookies in a way that made the judge laugh, Connor's counsel asked for a recess. They came back with a stack of papers and a face that had moved past pride into triage. We signed a confidential settlement with a number that made my hands shake and that I will never name, because the number itself isn't the point. The point is the clause that said he would withdraw from practice for 3 years, that he would send letters to every client whose estate streamlining he had overseen, that he would notify the bar of any new complaints, that he would sit for ethics training and write an article about the dangers of mixing romance and law that I plan never to read. Derek did not settle. He wanted his day to explain himself. He sat at the witness stand in a room with a bad view of a parking garage, and he said he loved me. He said he only wanted to keep me safe. He said he was trying to protect me from predatory relatives, which is what he called my niece. He said even then that the reply all was out of context. He said the cookie was just a cookie. He said he didn't know the trust details because Connor handled that stuff. He said a lot of words that felt like someone standing in a downpour with an umbrella made of lace. JC let him talk. Then she handed him gently a copy of the photo he'd taken of me holding the pledge card. You remember, don't you? The one where you were supposed to cover any unhelpful language with my hand. The one where my hand is squarely on the blank margin and the language, "No changes to be made to existing beneficiaries without client's express written consent, witnessed by 2 parties," stands crisp as daylight. "Mr. Irons," she asked, "what language did you intend to hide?" He stared at it. "I don't recall," he said. The judge did that thing with his eyebrows that made me think of the Space Needle in a windstorm. "You may recall," he said. Derek said nothing. The judge found for me. He ordered punitive damages against Derek for fraud and intentional interference with prospective economic advantage. He referred the matter to the prosecutor for potential criminal charges related to identity theft. I don't know what will come of that, and I may never know, but the referral itself felt like a tide turning. He ordered that all instruments, powers, logins, notarizations, and authorizations executed on my name in the past year be void ab initio. He ordered Derek to pay my fees. He ordered a lien against the Shell LLC's account and the seizure of any funds tied to transfers from my accounts. He read the order in a voice that sounded like old wood. When he finished, he looked at me again and said, "Ms. Hanlon, you were right to bring this." After outside on the courthouse steps, Seattle did what Seattle does. It sprinkled. Reporters were there because reply all justice makes good copy. I said into a microphone the only sermon I know, "Older women are told to be grateful for love, any love, even love that wants your password. We are told to be flattered by attention, even when attention is a crowbar. I am here to tell you I am grateful for friends, for evidence, for institutions that work when you insist they work. I am not grateful for men who think we are exits. The door is locked now. I walked down to the ferry dock and watched the water for a while. Nora and Mira flanked me like bookends. Ahmed texted a photo of a pineapple sticker he'd put on his laptop, a private joke I loved. At home, I changed my passwords again, because habits are how we keep ourselves. I set my beneficiaries to Mira and to a scholarship at ACTI that bears my mother's name, because women who scrimped for pearls deserve theater and girls who write their own light plots. At night now, sometimes, I still wake and feel a hand on my elbow that isn't there. Sometimes I see the Sorrento's lamps and hear a pianist play Misty. Sometimes I wonder how far men like Derek go and whether the ocean is far enough. And then I remember the way a room of adults drew breath all at once when a careless thumb tapped, "Reply all," and how the truth, bored with our drama, decided to be loud in a public place, and I sleep. There are new rules in my house. No helper gets my logins. I print hard copies and put them in a simple fireproof box. I added a second deadbolt to my door with a key that sits heavy in my palm. On my refrigerator, Mira taped a note that says, "Trust yourself." On my windowsill, the lilies Derek once brought withered, and I didn't replace them. I bought basil instead. It smells like summer when I brush it with my hand. If you were at the Sorrento that night, you know how quiet a room full of people can be. You know the shape of a gasp when 100 phones glow. You know why the bartender slid me water, why the pianist kept playing, why a lawyer's face, so smug, so certain, can shift color when a negligent thumb opens a trap. You know why, when the judge read the order, the woods seemed to breathe. My story is not a warning so much as a map. It starts at a hotel with velvet chairs, passes through a cafe with wet footprints on the floor, takes a ferry to a place where the mountains hold the sky down, and lands in a courtroom where the fluorescent lights hum and the flags don't move. Somewhere along the route, a woman older than the story most people tell about women decides she is done being an exit and becomes, instead, a door. And when it closes, it does not slam. It clicks. The click is what I hear now, right before sleep, right after I check the lock, and think, just once, how easily a careless thumb can send a life to everyone in the room, and how, for once, that mistake was my salvation. The end.